Morning, everybody. I'm Simon Constable. We have some breaking news here on the News Hub. Stocks dropping on the growing crisis in Ukraine. Russian equities particularly hard hit. This is happening as Western allies consider ways to punish Putin for military involvement in the former Soviet satellite. And meanwhile, Russia is said to be massing its military along the Crimean border. We'll have that and more right here, right now. Well, with more on this story about Russia's military, we've got Greg White in Moscow, who's been covering this with his team of reporters. Greg, thank you for being there.
I'm glad to be here.
So this crisis is deepening, and we're hearing that there is massing of military on the border, Russian military in Crimea. Tell us about this.
The Ukrainian government says they've seen evidence of massing of armored vehicles on the Russian side of the strait that separates Crimea from Russian territory, the Russian south there. We haven't had independent confirmation of that. The Russians aren't saying either way. And there are still large numbers of troops in Crimea who are obviously Russian, not all of whom are openly identifying themselves as such. But the Western capital service are saying that it's clear that the Russians have full operational control of Crimea now, with their troops all over the peninsula.
And meanwhile, Greg, we're seeing the Ukrainian reserves being called up en masse, ready to defend Ukraine if necessary.
Well, they've announced some sort of mobilization. It's not clear exactly how big it is, and these aren't reserves like you'd see in the United States, well-trained, prepared soldiers. These are people who probably hadn't worn a uniform or held a gun for, in some cases, more than a decade. So I think that's more a symbolic measure at the moment than any kind of serious preparation. The Ukrainian military is substantially smaller than the Russian, and it does at the moment appear that neither side wants war.
Okay, and Greg, we understand John Kerry, the Secretary of State, is going to be going, or has gone to Ukraine to have some stern words for the Russians.
This is an act of aggression that is completely trumped up in terms of its pretext. It's really 19th century behavior in the 21st century. You just don't invade another country on phony pretext in order to assert your interests.
And Greg, you're in Moscow, but you have a team of reporters in Ukraine and Crimea. Based on what they're telling you, what is the mood like in Ukraine with the Ukrainians?
In Kiev and the sort of revolutionary capital, I suppose as you'd call it now, there's a great deal of concern and nervousness, shock at the extent of the Russian takeover, and uncertainty about exactly what to do. And in some sense, it looks like they're waiting for guidance from the West on just what they're going to get support for and what message Kerry will bring. British Foreign Secretary Haig was there this morning, also touring, trying to sort of support them on that side.
One of the things that for Europe is very important is the supply of natural gas that has gone through the Ukraine, and Britain in particular needs that because it gets rather chilly there in the winter. What is the status on that? Do we know yet? Is that just going to continue flowing through, all fine?
As far as we know so far, the gas flow is moving smoothly. The bulk of Russia's exports to Europe cross Ukraine. And that pipeline doesn't get all the way to Britain, but covers lots of Central and Western Europe, gets as far as clients as far as France. It looks at the moment like both sides there have a strong desire to keep that pipeline open, both because Ukraine doesn't want to provoke Russia by threatening hard currency income, and Russia doesn't want to further anger its clients further west by cutting off flows to Ukraine.
And I know that the further west you go in Europe, the more angry they will be. Thank you very much. Greg White, always a pleasure.